of Christmas, from our heart to yours. As Anthony DeMello reminds us, the shortest distance between two hearts is a story. And because of that, the Jonesborough Storytellers Guild and the Storytelling Resource Place are uniting to present to you a special Christmas present. 5 storytellers will be sharing some of their favorite tales. For 25 years, the Jonesborough Storytellers Guild has been performing weekly in downtown Jonesborough. We've had audiences of visitors and locals that have made it a regular event to attend our storytelling performances. However, the last 10 months, our storytelling has had to go virtual. And while we are working out the medium, we wanted to have a special way for you to still enjoy our stories. And it's with that in mind that we are presenting the program today that will be posted for you on both Facebook and YouTube. We're hoping to make it available on Thanksgiving, and it will be available through Christmas for you to view with your friends and family, again and again if you desire. For a location for this event, we have decided on the Storytelling Resource Place, a historic resource guide for storytelling in downtown Mill Spring Park. The Storytelling Resource Place has thousands of books, hundreds of CDs and costumes and artwork, storyteller dolls and posters, all for people to come and visit who love storytelling and would like to learn more about it. And so as we cross the welcoming porch of the pre-Civil War building, which houses the Storytelling Resource Place, we open the doors and we go inside to listen to our stories. Join us now for our first teller, Mrs. Sandy Claus. She's going to be telling us the story of Minerva McAvee Gray Mouse with her special friend, Sunny Gumdrop. She reminds us that Christmas is not so much about opening presents as opening our heart. And so now join us as Judy Butterfly Farlow brings us a special story.
This is our favorite time. It's story time, and I'm so glad that you're here with us, and I'm going to share a story with you tonight. 'Twas the night before Christmas, and all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. That was true of the Browns' home. Well, true, almost true. Now, Big Brother Jimmy, with his red hair and freckles, why, he had kicked all of his covers off just dreaming about the Christmas red bike that he was going to get. Little Sister Sue, on the other hand, was all wrapped up in her little mermaid blanket, so tightly wrapped all you could see was the tip end of her nose sticking out. Mom Brown, why, she had fallen asleep quickly and deeply after her busy, busy day of cooking and cleaning. And Mr. Brown, why, Mr. Brown's snoring could be heard all the way down the hall to the family room where, unbeknownst to the Brown family, lived Minerva McAvee Gray Mouse and her family. Now, Minerva McAvee Gray Mouse and her family had hidden from the Browns, but particularly they hid from the Brown family cat named Joe. Joe Cat was a rather large yellow tabby cat. He had big, bright yellow eyes, large white teeth, and long, sharp claws. And the Gray Mouse children had been warned over and over and over again to look out for Joe Cat. Now, the Gray Mouse family, they were all asleep also beneath their fireplace wall. Well, there's that almost word again. They were almost asleep with the exception of Minerva McAvee Gray Mouse. Minerva was too excited to sleep because, you see, she was going to be off on an adventure tonight. She was going to find out what Christmas meant exactly. You see, she had seen the Browns get ready for Christmas. She'd seen them decorate a Christmas tree. She'd seen them put up on the nativity scene. She had spied on them while they wrapped presents. And she loved it because Mrs. Brown was making Christmas goodies, and that was one of Minerva's favorite things because she was able to go and sneak a few of the dropped crumbs. Minerva was excited. She was thinking about her name. She was very proud of her name. Minerva was named after her great aunt who had worked at the library at the city. But McAfee was named after her great-great-great-great-grandfather, who had been a great adventurer. He had sailed on a clipper ship all around the world and had so many stories to tell. Why, they even talked about his great adventures still now around the family gathering table. Minerva was ready to have an adventure herself, to find out what Christmas meant. She waited until everything was quiet and everyone was asleep, and she snuck out through that doorway that was right by the fireplace where the broken brick was. Watching very, very closely, she skittered over towards the nativity scene, climbed up on the table where the manger was and where the hay was located, and she began to talk to the figurines. And the figurines told her all about the baby that had been born in the manger, and about the shepherds that had come, and about the angels that had come, and the wise men that had come to honor him. After hearing all that, Minerva got ready to go across the floor, and she was watching very closely. Now, I bet you're wondering how it was that figurines could talk. Well, almost everybody knows that everything has the ability to talk on Christmas Eve, the holiest of all nights of the year. Looking about, making sure that Joe Cat wasn't anywhere around, Minerva skittered over to the Christmas tree, where she crawled up all the way to the very top, where a beautiful angel sat. And the beautiful angel began to tell her all about Christmas trees and presents and Santa Claus. There were so many things going on in Minerva's head, so many different things that she had been told about Christmas, about the nativity scene and Christmas trees and Santa Claus. There were so many things to think about. She just didn't know what to think about first, and she was thinking so hard about all those different things, trying to sort it out, that she forgot her parents' warning, and she forgot to be looking closely as she skittered across the side wall, getting ready to go back home. She was so busy thinking and not paying attention that she didn't notice that figure that was hidden way back there in the shadows. And just about the time she got right there by the wall, out of that shadow jumped, you know who it was, Joe Cat, the big yellow tabby cat with long white teeth and sharp, sharp claws. Minerva was so afraid, she was petrified, she couldn't move. And then to her surprise, Joe Cat just kind of walked over to her, and with his big paw pushed her a little tiny tidbit of cheese, and with a growly voice looked at her and said, "Merry Christmas," and he walked away. Later on, Minerva was all snuggled up with the rest of her family, getting ready to go to sleep, and she was thinking about everything that she had heard that night and about Joe Cat's actions. And then she realized what Christmas was really all about. Christmas was really all about love. That's what Christmas was really all about. As Minerva laid all snuggled up with the rest of her family, her brothers and sisters, thoughts of Christmas and love were going through her head. Finally, she snuggled down and closed her eyes and went to sleep. And finally, 'twas the night before Christmas, and all through the house, not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. My goodness, who is that at the door? Well, Sonny, it is so good to see you. How are you?
I'm sad,
You're sad? Why are you sad?
'cause I'm getting nothing for Christmas, 'cause I ain't been nothing but bad.
Sonny, it can't be that bad. I know you haven't been that bad, have you?
Well, I tried to polish Rudolph's nose. Somebody snitched on me
Oh, goodness.
to match Mrs. Santa's tainted toes. Somebody snitched on me. Now I know that Santa knows, so I got a lot more woes. But I guess that's the way it goes, 'cause somebody snitched on me. So I'm getting nothing for Christmas. Santa really is dead. I'm getting nothing for Christmas, 'cause I ain't done nothing but bad.
Well, Sonny, I know you couldn't have been possibly that bad. What in the world, what else happened?
I blew up the candy place. Somebody snitched on me. I had gummy bears all over my face. Somebody snitched on me.
What?
Tried to fly like the rainbows fly, with a balloon up in the sky. When I fell, I hit my, oh my, somebody snitched on me. I ain't seeing Santa Claus. He's not visiting me because.
Why isn't he visiting you?
Somebody snitched on me. But next year I'll go straight. I'm gonna be good. Just you wait.
What?
I'd start now, but I'm afraid it's too late. 'Cause somebody snitched on me.
Well, Sonny, you know what? What? Santa Claus is going to come see you anyway.
Anyway,
Yeah, because you try to be good, don't you?
yeah, I try really hard. It just doesn't always work out that way very good. But he's going to come see me anyway.
Yeah, he's going to come see you anyway. Does that make you happy?
Yeah, that makes me very, very happy. And I got one other thing to say.
You do? What other thing do you have to say?
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Merry Christmas.
That's all of that.
Our next teller, Stephen James, tells stories in many different ways. He has been a member of the Jonesborough Storytelling Guild for many years, but like many famous writers, he tries out his stories on his two daughters. Writers like J.R.R. Tolkien, C.S. Lewis, and Kenneth Grahame, and of course, Stephen James, have tried out their stories on their children before bed. So sometimes the biggest lessons for the holidays, Stephen reminds us, come from the most unexpected places. And so listen to hear about the day that Santa won.
So years ago, I was asked to tell stories at the Fayetteville's Host of Christmas Past festival celebration the first weekend of November. They wanted me to tell stories. They also had a magician who would be appearing, and they had the great-great-grandson of Charles Dickens who would be performing his rendition of A Christmas Carol. I said, well, that sounds great. No, I'd love to come tell stories for the program. And then Allison, who's in charge of the festival, said, one favor. I said, sure, what is it? She said, we're also having a contest on Victorian dress. We'd like you to be one of the judges. I'm like, you want me to be a judge for a Victorian dress contest? She said, yeah, absolutely, you'd be perfect. I said, you don't understand. I don't even know when the Victorian era was. She said, no, it's the 1800s to early 1900s, you'll be perfect. I said, the only thing I know about history is that it happened. There were wars, people fought, people died, it was sad, and that's about all that I know. She said, no, we need an objective person from out of town, you'll be great. My college roommate will be one of the judges, and you'll be one of the other experts. I said, all right, let me do my research. So it was 3 weeks before the Host of Christmas Past, and I went to do research. I watched Little House on the Prairie. Then I watched Gone with the Wind. I thought, I have no idea if it's the same time zone exactly or not, but at least they're both from the past. And then I went to the Host of Christmas Past's festival celebration, told stories in the morning, and then at noon, they led us down to the courthouse. And we very regally ascended the steps, sat at a table. Now, we were judging in 3 categories: originality, authenticity, and spirit. Spirit was how well they would schmooze the judges, according to Allison, but not in those exact words. So we sat down, and there were hundreds of people out there. Some were dressed in Victorian garb, some were dressed as normal, and as we sat down, we were introduced as the experts on the Victorian garb and the Victorian era. And I thought, well, at least I am. I hope that they know what they're doing as well. The first to come up were the children, mostly girls, but they came up one by one. They all looked like they came from Little House on the Prairie, so I gave them authenticity points. Some of them I gave originality, and then one girl came up carrying a little doll. I said, well, what's your baby's name? She said, Felicity. She was born in Williamsburg in 1873. I thought, I didn't even know Williamsburg existed in 1873. I'm like, you get spirit points for that. Check. So one by one, the children came up until all the girls had come, and then it was the turn for the boys, and there was really only one boy. He came up, and he looked like he was wearing clothes that were old, which was a good thing for him, for authenticity. But of course, it was just an old sweatshirt that said Green Bay Packers on the front of it, and I wasn't exactly sure if that was the Victorian era or not, so I didn't give him 10, maybe 6 out of 10. That was the women's turn. One by one, they came up, and they would show us their outfits. All of them looked amazing. Many of them had hand-sewn their outfits. The one lady came up, and she was like, this button right here is authentic from 1880. It was passed down through the generations until I hand sewed it onto my outfit. I thought, well, that's fantastic, good for you. And she unbuttoned it. She came to the next button. She said, and this one also is from the original 1800s and blah, blah, blah. And she unbuttoned that button. Then she said, I'd like to show you something else. And she leaned over and pulled up the edge of her dress to show me her boots. These are authentic boots. They came down through the generations from the 1890s. Then she starts pulling her dress out more. These stockings, I was like, I think I've seen enough. I'm thinking, this is a woman who really wants to win her category. So I was like, spirit points galore, but I don't want to see anything else today. Well, then after the women, it was time for the men. Now, as we were doing the contest, I noticed that there were a few men dressed up as soldiers. They were alive, so I gave them spirit points because I figured they probably were dead and then they needed at least all the support that they could get. So I gave them spirit points just for being alive. There was one guy who came up and he was like dressed up as a frontiersman. I said, tell me, what do you like to do? Giving him the opportunity, kind of passing him the ball. He could spike it in my court. And he's like, well, I work at a pharmacy, and then on weekends I go jogging and I sell videos part-time at the video store. I'm thinking, they didn't even invent jogging back in the Victorian era. I'm not giving you any spirit points for that. And then it was time for Santa Claus. Now, while we'd been doing the judging, Santa Claus had been working the crowd, going around handing out candy to all the children. And then when it was finally his time to walk on stage, he came up kind of raising his arms like this. And all the kids are chanting, Santa Claus, Santa Claus. So the adults are cheering, bribery, bribery. Santa comes up and he hands us each a book. And he says, now you can keep that book. On page 54 is the photograph on which my outfit is based. I'm like, okay. Pretty authentic sounding. And then he said, and the beard is real. Want to tug it? Personally, I have this actual rule against tugging other men's beards. It's just one of those things that doesn't sit well with me. But Allison's roommate and the other judge, who was the fire chief's wife, all tugged his beard and confirmed to me that indeed it was real. Then he turned back to the crowd, lifted his arms, and I gave him points, we gave him points, and he went back to the crowd as the children chanted, Santa Claus, Santa Claus. Well, we all conferred together, and we realized that we had the same 3 people chosen for first, second, and third place. I had the doll with Felicity as number 1, then Santa Claus, and then the over-enthusiastic button lady as number 3. They had a different order, but we all ended up choosing that Santa Claus would win. So when we announced the winner, all of the children cheered. Santa Claus threw candy into the air. Santa Claus! Santa comes walking up the steps doing like this number. All the adults start booing. Boo, boo. I'm thinking, who boos Santa Claus? Like, you can boo the Cubs if they don't win their game, but you don't boo Santa Claus. But then I found out why they were booing Santa Claus. Apparently, the year before, he had entered the contest as well with the exact same outfit. And he had won the year before. Now, I was an expert on Victorian garb, but not necessarily on who had won the contest in previous years. And so I didn't know that. And when we gave him the award, the children cheered and the adults booed. Finally, it was time to go back to have lunch before telling stories later in the afternoon. Well, at the restaurant where we were, the magician was doing tricks with, pulling a rope through his neck, and people were gathered about. The great-great-grandson of Charles Dickens was having a slaw burger over next to me. And then a family walked in. The little girl, it was the one who was carrying Felicity. Well, she walked in, they ordered some hamburgers, and she came over to watch the magician doing his tricks. And I said to her, I leaned close, said, "I thought you should have won." And she shrugged a little bit. And then she said, "There's always next year." I said, "Will Felicity be back next year?" And the little girl shook her head and she said, "Then it wouldn't be original." And I thought, this is the kind of girl that can outvalue Santa Claus. And I was like, this gives me hope for the future. And so we went back to the festival. I told stories. Gerald told his rendition of A Christmas Carol. The magician did his tricks. And I went home thinking, if they invite me back next year, I, as an expert on Victorian garb and the Victorian era, would be glad to be a judge. But I don't think I will. I'll give someone else the chance to say yes or no to the spirit points.
Our storyteller, Linda Poland, is a founding member of the Jonesborough Storytelling Guild, and she tells stories all over the world. She's also the resident storyteller of Jonesborough. And she reminds us with Charlotte Carpenter, remember that if Christmas is not found in your heart, you won't find it under a tree. And so we present a story entitled Old but Priceless.
I first heard this story. It was actually given to me as I sat on the front porch with a friend. That friend had horses. And we looked out and the sun was setting and everything took on that golden hue. And she said, "I want to tell you something." And it's a true story. And it began like this. A brother and sister were making their annual trip out to the countryside to see their mother and father for Christmas. Well, it was out to the Lonesome Pine Farm. It was way out a long and winding road. And it was called Lonesome Pine because of a beautiful, beautiful pine that sat up on top of a hill and its branches stretched out, and it was just regal. Not only was it for the farm, but it was a landmark for people who went out into the country. Well, they had grown up there and they had many fond memories. But the hustle bustle of the city had called them away, and they were living a much more exciting life, they thought. Busy, busy, busy. As the visit to their parents progressed, things got more and more tense. And the son said, "Father, why do you keep all of these horses and this place? You're so far out. You need to cut corners." And the sister chimed in and said, "Yeah, you need to cut corners so you can save money for yourselves." Well, the father looked down and kind of scraped his foot on the old barn floor. And he looked at his boots. His boots were old, and he said, "I guess I could use a new pair of boots." "Well, there you have it," said the son. "I mean, why do you keep this old mare? This old one hasn't given you any foals in years. She's just an expense to you now. Why don't you dispose of at least her? Why do you keep her? And the old man ran his hand up over the neck of that old horse and rubbed her ears. And he looked at his children and just said, because of love. We love her. And she gives us something to get up for every morning. Something to come out. Yes, it's getting harder that we're older now to get out to the barn on those frosty mornings. But it gives us a reason to get up. And we love taking care of them in the morning, and then they pay us back as we sit on the porch and we watch them in those golden sunsets. It's because of love. Well, he could see on their faces that they were getting exasperated and baffled. Because of love, because of love. We don't understand you, so we're going. Merry Christmas. And they got in their car and left. The wife came over and slid her arm through her husband's, and they were quiet for a while, and then he said, why is it that they don't understand? They don't seem to have any peace in their hearts or love. I mean, these horses are more like family than our children are now. They stood there, and they just wondered how this had all happened. And I guess because of the terse words and the hurried departure, no one noticed how the smoke was coming out of the side of the barn. You see, the old wiring in that old barn had set the insulation on fire. And by the time they smelled the smoke and knew what was happening, the barn suddenly burst into flame. It was almost like an explosion. The old man told his wife to run and call for help. And he ran towards the barn. He just needed to open up those big doors so he could save his horses. But the closer he got, the more the flames came back at him. He tried several times till he dropped to his knees in the snow in exhaustion. He wept. And as his wife came out and took him in her arms and began to rock him, they both were still on their knees in the snow when the firemen came. They pulled themselves up and they looked at the firemen and nodded their thanks to him, but there was nothing they could do. The barn was gone. It was flat. The ashes so black against the white snow. The firemen did a few things and then they got in their truck and left. He took his wife's snowy white head and laid it against his shoulder after wiping the tears from her eyes with his old bandana. And he said, come on, honey, let's go up the hill to the old pine. We've always found our strength there. It'll give us peace as we look down and see that God has spared our house, and we'll give our thanks. And so they started up that hill. It wasn't easy on their old, exhausted bodies in the deep snow. And as they got up to the knoll that was right under the tree, they looked up and their breath was taken away. They couldn't believe what they saw. That pine looked like every star that was in that sky had been set one by one on the snowy branches. And when they looked to the top, there was a crescent moon that looked like it had been placed there by the angels themselves. And they looked and they saw their house and they gave thanks. Then the old man thought he heard something. And he pulled his wife up and they went up farther. And there in resplendent beauty around the trunk of that pine was the entire herd of horses, safe, all nestled close to the old one. And the old one looked at the ones she loved with her golden eyes, hoping that she hadn't disappointed him. And the old man became so joyful, he began to sing. And he wondered how this all happened. But you see, the old one, as soon as she saw that first spark, had opened the back door of the barn and led the whole herd out with great dignity and never looking back. She took those horses, and they followed her closely. The foals ran around because they were so nervous. The younger horses, they turned and they looked back at the fire and the licking flames, and they tucked their tails and they began to jump from side to side like jackrabbits. And the mares that were full with the babies for the next season pressed hard against the old mare for security. And she led them all up and bedded them down underneath that pine. And now her golden eyes met her people's golden eyes. And they all gave thanks. And on that starry, starry night, the old man just burst out in song. And he and his wife sang Silent Night.
As a child, Betty Ann Paloha religiously watched the Roy Rogers and Dale Evans television show. And she firmly believed that they could do everything that she saw them do on her television set. Now, when Dale Evans said, "Christmas, my child, is about love in action," Betty Ann was at that age where she was struggling to believe in her heroes, especially her hero, Santa Claus. She needed proof. And so tonight, she tells the personal story of believing in Santa Claus.
It's Christmas, and I decided to tell a family story. My mother was one of 11 children. They were first-generation Americans. And it didn't matter that their parents couldn't speak English, they didn't have a lot of money, and they didn't have indoor plumbing. They had each other. And even after they grew up and married and had their own families, they stuck together. They came together to celebrate the good times and to help each other over the bad times. Now, my mother called her extended family the relation. And growing up, the relation was my whole world. And for better or worse, they were the people who made me who I am today. It was the night before Christmas, and all through the house, every creature was stirring, even the mouse. The women were all gathered round the dining room table because that's where the food was laid out. The men were all gathered around the kitchen table because that's where the booze was laid out. And we kids, we just ran around everywhere. It was the night before Christmas in my Aunt Betty's narrow row house. We hardly fit. The whole relation wasn't there, but a good part of it was. And to add to the confusion, some adult announced that Santa Claus was coming in person. The little kids, they all ran to the window and stuck their noses up against the glass, looking for that red light in the sky that meant Rudolph was driving the sleigh. But we older kids, you know, the 8, 9, 10-year-olds, we knew what the story was. We all huddled together in a corner, discussing which one of our uncles was going to pretend to be Santa Claus. We ruled out Uncle Johnny because he was injured in the war and walked with a limp. That would be a dead giveaway. Uncle Emil was too tall and skinny. Now, Uncle Tommy liked kids. He worried about them a lot. He was the one who always told us to button up our coats and not stand too close to the bat. He liked kids, but maybe he didn't have the right personality. I knew my father was not even in the running. My dad worked 2 jobs. He was always tired and grumpy. Odds-on favorite was Uncle Gusty. Uncle Gusty had blonde hair and blue eyes. He was a salesman, and he could pull a quarter out of your ear. That's who everybody bet on. But you know, even though I thought they were right, I still kind of hoped they were wrong. I so much wanted to believe in the real Santa Claus.
A little while later, my Aunt Betty announced that Santa Claus was here. All the kids go into the living room, sit in a circle. All the chairs, the sofas, and the dining room chairs were pushed up against the wall to fit all the mothers and the older cousins who were pregnant by this time. And all us kids sat down with our legs crossed in front of our parents' knees. And Santa came in, ho, 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 and I looked at him and I tried to see his eyes, but I couldn't tell. I couldn't tell if it was Uncle Gusty or anybody else. And I got excited. And he stood, if you imagine, a clock at 12 o'clock, and he went to his left. And what was the amazing thing was this man was not giving out cheap candy canes. He had a sack on his back with boxes in it. And he turned to my cousin, Patsy, on his left, and he said, "Patsy, you're such a good artist. You're the best in the whole relation. And this present is for you." And Patsy opened it up, and it was a 24-pack of Crayola crayons with points on them and a pack of paper. Wow. The next was a boy. It was Franny. He was older than me. Santa Claus said, "Franny, you're a great baseball player. This is for you." And Franny opened up his box and he got a new hardball. And I thought he was the real Santa Claus because he knew us. He knew what we were good at, he knew what we liked, and he knew what to give us for a present. I was so excited. I didn't care about the little teddy bears and toy trucks that the little kids got. I was watching my cousins. And then Santa Claus came to Mary Ann. And Mary Ann got this big box. It must have been like 30 inches long. And Santa Claus said, "Mary Ann, this is for you because you're the best girl in the whole relation." The best girl? Wait a minute. How did she get to be the best girl? Who said so? That wasn't fair. She opened her box and she had a doll that had blonde hair and blue eyes that opened and closed. The best girl? And Santa Claus kept going. Patsy was the most creative girl and she got a puzzle. And he kept going and going, and I was wondering what was left for me. I mean, sports and, oh, my cousin Madeline, she was the smartest girl. She got a chapter book. Oh, what was left? What was left? Smart was gone, and creative was gone, artist was gone, sports was gone. I was going to be the prettiest girl. That's it. I was going to be the prettiest girl in the whole relation. I held my breath, hoping, and Santa Claus got to my cousin Mickey. Mickey was down there right across from Santa Claus at like 6 o'clock. And Santa Claus gave him the box and said, "Mickey, this is for you." And just as Mickey lifted off the top of his box, he said, "Because you're the baddest boy in the whole relation." The box had coal and orange peels. And Mickey folded his arms, kicked the box with his foot, and sneered, proving he might be the baddest boy in the whole relation. And Santa Claus kept going, and he got to me, and he said, "And Betty Ann, this is for you." And I took the box, and I ripped it open, and he said, "Because you are the baddest girl in the whole relation." And there was the coal and the orange peels, and I cried. I was embarrassed. I turned my head into my mother's knees and didn't look at anybody. And I thought, this is not Santa Claus. Santa Claus knows that I'm not the baddest girl. Well, you might wonder why a good parent would do this to their child. But you got to remember that my parents, aunts, and uncles grew up in the Depression. They knew a lot more about Orphan Annie than they did about Dr. Spock. It was a hard knock life. Well, Santa Claus kept going. He finished. He said, "Merry Christmas to all, and to all a good night," and he left. And a few moments later, My Aunt Betty rushed into the room and she said, Betty Ann, Santa Claus was going out the door and he realized there was another box in his bag and he made a mistake. You're not the baddest girl in the whole relation. This is for you. And I looked at the box and it was about 12 inches long and only 1 or 2 inches high. It was the perfect size for a comb and a mirror for the prettiest girl. I tore it open and lifted off the lid and saw a pair of slipper socks. Slipper socks. What did that say about me? They were red, solid red. You know, they had the suede on the bottom and the stitching around the foot. There were no flowers or lace or anything. And they were red. And then I knew that Aunt Betty felt sorry for me. And besides getting coal and orange peels, Mickey, my cousin, was going to have one less present under the tree tomorrow morning because I had his slipper socks. We got in the car and went home. As we drove, I looked up at the sky and I saw red lights. And I said, that's an airplane. Everybody knows it's not Rudolph. Just might get used to it. There's no Santa Claus. When we got to my house, my mother handed me the keys and said, open up the back door. You know, she had to carry the dishes from the meal that we had, and my father had to carry my brother because he fell asleep. I went over to the back door and I went to stick the key in the lock and I could see a glow coming from the inside of the house. Was there a fire? We never left the light on. No, you never left the light on. Electricity costs money. As soon as you left the room, you turned the light off. I opened the door and the glow was coming from the living room. And I walked across the kitchen and I peeked around the corner. And the Christmas tree was lit up with those big bulbs we used to have and those individual pieces of tinsel. And it shone there and I thought, oh, somebody had the Christmas tree lights on. Oh, we're lucky the house didn't burn down. You never went out and left your Christmas lights on. That was worse than not turning the lights out. But in front of the Christmas tree was a tin dollhouse. I mean a big tin dollhouse. And the roof was painted with shingles and the walls had wallpaper and the floor had carpets and there was a bag of furniture and a whole family of people. How did it get here? It wasn't there when we left. My mother would never leave a Christmas tree lights on. And my parents were in the car, loaded down with dishes and a child. I knew how it got there. The Santa Claus brought it. And I believed in Santa for one more year. Thank you. Merry Christmas.
Music plays such an important part of our Christmas celebrations. And Bess Aldridge reminds us that Christmas was a night of song, and it wrapped itself around you like a shawl. But it warmed more than your body. It warmed your heart, filled it too with a melody that would last forever. Our next storyteller, Tony Marr, explains one special song in a story entitled A Thrill of Hope.
As the year 1846 was quickly coming to an end, a young French seminary student was excitedly going to his P.O. box every single afternoon, waiting for that letter that would come, waiting with hopeful anticipation. And in late December it came. He'd gotten his first appointment by the Catholic Church, a small parish about 3 hours outside of Paris. He did as much research as he could on the local culture, the local customs, and the history of the small little parish. Now, it was a small church. Average congregation on a weekend service was less than 100. But the membership of the church was 3,000. 400 as far as they could tell. He had his work cut out for him, and he was excited to get boots on the ground and start working early that next year. But as his youthful enthusiasm and exuberance towards his new position was bursting forth, when he moved into the parish and began to make his way throughout town, meeting with people and inviting them to come to church, many for the first time in months, if not years, he began to grow weak, discouraged at what he was seeing. As the weeks turned into months, the church wasn't growing at the rapid rate that he had hoped for. In fact, what little attendance there was declining. He had meetings with those above him, trying to come up with a plan, an idea for what they could do, but nothing was working. As he was quickly approaching his 1-year anniversary, he was feeling down, he was feeling discouraged, and well, he was quickly losing hope, and the hope that anything could ever change in this small little French parish. Then he had an idea. Christmas Eve, candlelight mass, was quickly approaching. It was less than a month away, and he knew if he could do something big for that. It was the largest service of the year, and if he could just do something special, maybe it would prompt something in the hearts of the men, women, and children in his village. Over the last year, he had worked up a relationship with the town mayor. Now, the mayor was a Catholic by name only. He hadn't attended service at the small little parish, well, since long before the new minister had arrived. But he asked him to sit down for coffee. They met, they caught up, they chatted. And then the young priest hit him with a request. You see, besides being the mayor of the small town, this man was also the commissioner of wines. He was a wine broker. And while he loved wine and he loved governing this small little town, his true passion lived in his art and love of poetry. He was a renowned poet who was often credited with writing beautiful prose. And so the priest petitioned him to write a poem that could be recited at Christmas candlelight. Now the young poet was taken aback because he himself knew that he hadn't been to church in a long time, much to the dismay of the young priest. He said, "Why don't you give me some time to think about it? I just don't know that I'm the right man for the job." The young priest assured him of his capabilities and expressed to him the dire nature of the situation. The commissioner of wines, the mayor of the town, the poet. The poet thought about it. And he said, "You know what? What's your time frame?" The priest said, "Well, obviously Christmas Eve and maybe a little time to prepare before that." The mayor explained to him that he was that very afternoon taking a coach to Paris, where he would be for the next 2.5 weeks. The time would be tight, but if he would give him the freedom to not have anything to him for about 3 weeks, he would accept. They agreed, they shook hands, and they left. The commissioner went back to his little humble room to get things ready for his trip to the big city. His mind was thinking about what he was going to write. How was he possibly going to write a poem for candlelight mass on Christmas Eve? As he was stuffing the last of his things for his trip into his duffel bag, he remembered his old Bible. And he went and dug around in a drawer until he found it. He pulled it out and he tucked it into the duffel and made his way down the stairs and into the back of the horse-drawn carriage. On his journey to the city, he pulled out a notebook, a pen, and his Bible. Through his foggy, vague memory, he thought to open to Luke chapter 2. He read the nativity story and he read it again. He put pen to paper and began to write the words that flowed from his heart. He was astonished that by the time that his 3-hour trip to Paris had finished, he had it. He had a poem that he was so moved by that he thought it was perhaps the greatest work that he had ever produced. There was only one problem. The more that he read it, the more that he realized it wasn't a poem at all. He had just penned the words to a song. The problem was he wasn't a composer. He knew nothing about music, but it just so happened that he was good friends with a very well-renowned composer who lived in Paris. So he sent word if they could meet for dinner that very evening, and in a small little cafe in Paris, he slid the notebook across the table. The composer read it and began to laugh when he realized the subject matter, because he said, "Do you not realize I'm Jewish?" They both had a good laugh, and he said, "Just please read it again." The composer reread the poem, and he was greatly moved by the words that he'd read, even though he didn't believe their meaning. "How soon do you need it?" he asked. "As soon as possible. I'm in town for another 2 weeks. Do you think that you could have something done by then?" The composer leaned back in his chair and laughed. "That was quite the deadline, but I'll give it a try." Less than a week later, he got a message, a telegram. The composer wanted to meet with him. They were to meet at the same little cafe that they'd met in just a little over a week earlier. There was an excitement and an anticipation as he sat in the chair waiting for the composer to arrive. He saw him coming down the street with a bounce in his step and a smile on his face. "You've got to hear it. I think it's maybe the best thing that I've ever composed." The poet, listening attentively, was moved to tears. He couldn't wait to get on that little coach home in another week. It was bubbling up inside of him. And just a few days before Christmas Eve, a few days before Christmas Mass, when he got back into his home of that small little French village and called the priest over and played it for him, they all just sat in silence, amazed at what they were hearing. The priest, not expecting to have a song, had to make some quick arrangements. Because you see, what was played in front of him was nothing that he dared try to sing himself. So he enlisted the help of an opera singer who lived in the town. And on December 24th, 1847, on a snowy Christmas Eve night, in a small little French village, a tiny little parish, packed wall to wall, with candles flickering for the first time in history, these words were sung. "Oh, holy night, the stars are brightly shining. It is the night of our dear Savior's birth. The thrill of hope was born. Oh, holy night, may you and your family have a very Merry Christmas."
We hope that you have enjoyed our Christmas presents and will remember to join us after the holidays via Zoom to listen to our weekly Stories and More, beginning Tuesday, January 5th, from 7 to 8:30, and each Tuesday after that. Also, keep tuned in to visit the Storytelling Resource Place as soon as it reopens to the public. We would like to end with this final thought by George Matthew Adams. Let us remember that the Christmas heart is a giving heart, a wide open heart that thinks of others first. The birth of the baby Jesus stands as the most significant event in all of history because it has meant the pouring into a sick world of the healing medicine of love, which has transformed all manner of hearts for over 2,000 years. Underneath all the bulging bundles is the beating Christmas heart.
Savior's birth. Would you sing it with us? Long lay the world in sin and error pining, till he appeared and the soul felt its worth. The thrill of hope, a weary world rejoices, for yonder breaks a new and glorious morn. Fall on your knees, oh hear the angel voices, oh night divine, oh night when Christ was born, oh night divine.